All right, you've got 5 o'clock and you're live.
We're live. Do we have any people visiting? Can you tell?
You've got 3 viewers watching out in YouTube land.
Super.
One of them might be Katie, actually.
Well, welcome to anyone who is invisible to us, but still exists. If you agree, you exist. So let's get the meeting in order and calling the roll. I'll do that. The wrong list in front of me. I'm here. Luke Murphy.
Here. I'm here.
David Risberger.
I'm here.
And Katie Lapari-Shu is out. And we also have in the meeting Mark Davies and Gary Herzig and Kevin Schultz from the Environmental Board. So thank you all for being here. And our first order of business is to approve minutes. And do the members of the committee, based on what we had gotten, do you agree the minutes are okay, or do you have any concerns about them?
I had
Good
no
to me when I
concern.
looked them over.
Okay, we're good to go to approve the minutes. And I guess this question of public comment will come to that because Kevin is not really part of the public, but he's going to be talking a little bit about the ordinance itself and the intent of the ordinance. And but our first order of business is the flag policy. I will just say that I've read the policy draft that has coming through the rye has come. And I have nothing to say at this point. Does anybody else have any comments on the ordinance that I had sent out that I got from Dave?
John, was that an ordinance that was changed?
I'm sorry, it's not an ordinance, it's a policy. No, there's
Well,
been no.
was it a policy that was changed, or was it the one that was tabled?
This is the one that I have that was from you.
Okay.
Talking about the policy itself. And I don't know if there's any change from that. I didn't check it against the other one. But are you satisfied that represents the policy as you want to see it?
Well, it was tabled during the council meeting because what was brought up was about the POW MIA flag.
Sure.
And then it was voted to be tabled. And since then, we've looked, and some municipalities do fly that periodically during the year. I had put out a question of, do we already fly that flag, or does it fly in the Veterans Memorial walkway? And it took a while to get an answer. The people I sent the question to didn't answer right away, we relied on Greg to find the answer for us. And Greg came back. Greg was great, and he said that the POW MIA flag currently flies all the time over at the Veterans Memorial walkway. So I would be satisfied if we add that in, which a few council members had asked to have that added. And if we add, what makes sense for me anyway, is adding it to the last sentence of the policy. So it would read, in addition to those flags, the flags of the various branches of the United States military services, as well as the POW MIA flag, may be flown on the Veterans Memorial flagpoles located in Neowa Park.
That's okay with me. Other thoughts? Well, the one thing I might say is, in addition to, just take that out and just say that's our practice is to fly it. But let's hear from other people first.
Well, the reason it says in addition to, John, is because of what comes before it. If you read, you want me to read the whole motion?
Sure.
If I read it out loud, I mean, it may help. Motion that the Common Council establishes a policy that only the flag of the United States, the flag of the state of New York, or of the city of Oneonta shall be flown on any flagpole owned by the city of Oneonta and which is located in front of or adjacent to any public building in the city. In addition to those flags, the flags of the various branches of the United States military services, as well as the POW MIA flag, may be flown on the Veterans Memorial flagpoles located in Neowah Park.
That's fine with me.
Maybe
I
we should ask
understand
Mr. Merzig if,
May
Look-
I make one tiny tweak? If we could change the term military services to armed services, because depending on when we're talking, the Coast Guard isn't always under the Department of Defense. Believe right now it's Homeland Security. That would be the only thing I would change.
Yeah, Coast Guard it's really funny. I'd like to stay away from that because we have actually several more services that are considered military, National Oceanic and the other, of course, is the Department of the Air Force of the Department of the Space Force,
Mhm.
which is a legitimate thing. I don't want to go there actually.
wait, I guess I'm not understanding here. Are you saying that,
Military services, if you look it up, includes the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, the Medical Corps. It's just an officer group, and there's another group. They can all be buried. Anyone in that service can be buried at Arlington because they're considered military services. But that's completely. It's just the crazy stuff that comes up when we try to regulate something.
Right.
We-
So yeah. So and that would be the differences between the uniform services, which just includes all of those.
No. I'm going to be a pain in the ass. They're all considered military services.
Well, I think I'll probably be equally a pain and say that the official term is the uniforms, and then there's also the armed services, and the armed services don't include NOAA.
But they also have the Merchant Marine.
are we splitting hairs here?
Yes, we are. This is the problems when we bring things up and try to control them. I'm just being a pain in the neck. I'm happy with because my thought. There's somebody else here. Mark, do you want to participate in this at all?
That's up to you all. I think I'll be participating when this comes before council.
You're a B guy. Okay. I'm fine with what you're proposing, Dave, and I don't want to go in these other directions, but I just noticed there are other things that can come up. If we have somebody who's a veteran of NOAA, for example, who moves only onto, they may raise a question, but if you look at it, the military services are, never mind. It's just what happens when I start Googling.
Let's ask Mr. Merzig. Mr. Merzig, would it matter if we have military services versus armed service? Does it matter to you?
Doesn't matter to me. Again, we're talking about what is allowed, not what's mandated.
Yeah.
I was just taking a quick look.
Yeah.
It says that the armed services is a force that's a branch of the armed services, military service, ground service, regular army. The 5 armed services are the Army, Marine Corps, Navy, Air Force, Space Force, and Coast Guard are the armed forces of the United States. I don't know what we fly there. Frankly, I don't know all the services, but again,
Well, I know
The
Coast
answer
Guard
is-
is there.
Coast Guard is there and the Merchant Marine is there. I have the photographs.
Then why don't we leave it
we
at
say
military
our-
service? And that
then
way
we
it
can-
covers everything. I don't think we're going to have a representative from NOAA coming to demand that their flag be flown.
They can't demand it. We have
They
to
can
decide
ask.
whether it's permitted.
Right.
It's not the Vatican flag, which we'd have to go special. It's legitimate human beings who have served their country in uniform.
Okay, so are we in agreement that we're adding the POW MIA flag
That's good. That's
to that
fine.
sentence?
I'm fine with that. Yeah.
Okay. David, can you make sure that's put on the agenda or changed and put on the agenda, or is that just a job for Gary?
I bet Carrie's listening.
Katie's on the call. She'll see that it's on the agenda that is sent to me.
I can change how about if I change the motion here and send it to Katie?
Sure.
Okay.
And that would need to be a hard copy that everybody has a chance to review and work over. Sure. Okay.
Again, remember this is a policy. This is not
It's
not
a
an
policy,
ordinance, it's not a
yes.
local law, it's not anything, it's a policy.
All right. Okay, we can move on. And we can talk about the beekeeping ordinance. We have, just so, who's here? Oh, yeah. We have two samples of bee ordinances, one sent by David, and the other one has been apparently worked on between you, Kevin, and Steve Yearley. And I sent those both out. But now I think the first thing is to understand what you're trying to do from the environmental board. What are you suggesting this be to help us with an ordinance?
So, yeah, it's very hard to refrain from bad puns. So I will put out there right now that any puns related to bees that might come out of my mouth are purely unintentional.
Sure.
So, and thank you also for inviting me to speak to this committee. So a little backstory, back in March at the last environmental meeting before everything shut down, we had got, and I think this is in the letter that I had sent along with the proposed ordinance, we had gotten a request from a citizen of the city of Oneonta, bringing it to look into the possibility of beekeeping within the city boundaries. And frankly, I think a lot of us were quite surprised to find that beekeeping was actually not allowed, specifically written in as an ordinance that was not allowed within city limits. And so we looked into it, and by the time it took a while to get back the environmental board back online. That was kind of one of the last things to do when we're switching the government over to online stuff. And so we started to look at it, and at that same time, Stephen Yearley had gotten wind of what we were doing and said, "Hey, look, I just happen to have something that I've been working on." And so it's some back and forth between him and the members of the environmental board. That is the proposal we put in front of you. Reason we think that this is important is that, one, it just to keep in mind, bees pollinate about a third of the food that we eat. And if we look at the kind of the foodstuffs that are pretty important for the New York State area, 90% of apples are pollinated, 90% of onions, blueberries, cucumbers, carrots, and so on are pollinated by bees. And clearly these are certainly apples, right, is a big part of New York agriculture. In general, bees provide about $15 billion in value in crop production in the United States. So clearly, bees are are very, very important. In terms of local resources, they're useful for restaurants and hotels. It's an important aspect of urban agriculture. It is an improvement to our local garden crops and can be a secondary source of income to our residents. We should also so that's one way that we're looking at this. And this is if you read Oneonta 2030, which is kind of our roadmap that the city had adopted 7 years ago now, I guess. Food security was part of that Oneonta 2030. And so this, we feel, would fit well into that. Maybe many of you might know that bees are in danger of collapsing. There is what is called the colony collapse disorder. That they're starting to understand what is going on, scientists, but the more communities can help bees, the better. And one of the things that we can do, in addition to things promoting local wild bees, is to also include local beekeeping. Let's see, what else do I want to say about that? So that's kind of where we're thinking about this. There's we've also, and so this is something that I think is a lot of urban areas are starting to do this. You might be able to split some hairs on whether or not we would consider this an urban environment, even though we have a city charter. But they do very, very well. The fact, better than wild honeybees sometimes, because all the local gardens and things and farms around here, since we're not really too monoculture of agriculture out here, it's actually a very good thing for the honeybees. If you look at the ordinance, I don't know what the second ordinance proposal that you had was. So I would imagine some of this speaks to that as well. But it's certainly the ones that we worked on. We try to take into consideration both the health of the bees and also the local population. So bees typically go out about 3 miles and typically fly at heights of 30 feet. And so if you are going to have a beehive in your yard, there are certain setbacks that we put into there, and mandatory 10-foot barriers so that it causes the bees to fly up and over and reach basically their cruising altitude before they cross the boundary between neighbors. Some other concerns that people have about honeybees is it's going to increase the number of bees right in the immediate area. Just to kind of put how that's not really going to be, it's really usually not a problem, is that a healthy colony can produce in a year about 100 pounds of honey. And 1 pound of honey requires about the pollination of 2 million flowers. So the bees are not going to be able to build all their honey by going into your next door neighbor's garden. Another thing that I think we put in there is the provision of getting special bees that are specially been bred for beekeeping. The honeybees in general are already very gentle and only sting when they are provoked, because they die after stinging you. And most people are getting stung by yellow jackets and other things. And so one of the things that if the legislative council decides to go forward with this, and then the city council decides to move forward on this, I think one thing that the environmental board would like to be a part of is a general education program to help people understand what is actually a honeybee, what are the other things that are more likely to sting you, and to also promote healthy beekeeping. So I guess that's kind of my spiel. I also
Thank you.
Yeah, I'd like to point out that what we put forward is not something that we feel that that ordinance has to be exactly that way for the environmental board to give its blessing. We just thought that we would make your guys' job a little bit easier, along with Steve, and to try to give you guys a place to start.
Luke, do you have a question or a thought?
Yeah, thought. I think this is great. I think it's a win all around. I think it's great for our local environments as well as a local economy. I know that beekeeping is a kind of a growing occupation. There's a lot of folks. I actually have a couple friends that really enjoy doing it. They're out in Massachusetts, so I think it could add some added recreational activity. I know it's a lot of work, but some added activities for the area. I think it's a great idea, and I appreciate you folks bringing it before the board.
Thank you.
David?
Yeah, on its face value, I like the idea. I do have some concerns, though. From what I've read, in larger cities, like New York City allows beekeeping, but they also have people that work for the city that specialize in beekeeping, and this is a division of their code office, and are ready to go out at a moment's notice if they have to deal with any swarm issue, which I know it's not something that frequently happens, but with honeybees, there's reasons why swarming happens if the bees aren't properly maintained, for example. So I think it's great that we put a lot of regulations in place. The question I have is, what happens when or if the beekeeper is not doing the right thing, and then we have an issue with their bees? I mean, yeah, we can revoke their permit, but then we still have a bee problem. And the other piece of that is bee allergies. We have kids in our neighborhoods, and some people get really squeamish over this, especially if they're allergic to bees. They get very squeamish. So even if we have a 6 foot setback from the property line, and you have to have a 6 foot fence, bees travel. So I'm not quite sure how to address this, what we need to do to address these issues. I think the biggest one for me, though, is really having somebody on staff that can deal with the issue rather than just write a ticket, because then we still have the issue potentially at hand.
Mm-hmm.
So that is something that is written in from Stephen Yearley's in Section D, Part 3. The code enforcement officer is authorized to inspect or cause to be inspected annually any property to which a beekeeping permit was issued to assure compliance with this code. And so, I mean, that could certainly be something, and I certainly don't want to, I can't speak for the code enforcement officer or any of that. I don't know exactly what that expertise is, but that would seem to be something that would be up to them to be able to decide. In terms of bee allergies, that's certainly something that is a concern, and it's not just the setback. There's also, you can't fit the hive can't be any closer than 10 feet between any boundary, if you read the code. So for instance, that would make it impossible for me to have a beehive here in the second ward. My property line is very narrow.
It's too close. Yeah, that'll take out a lot of houses.
So there would be a lot of that. We've also put in restrictions on the number of hives that can be placed onto a property. And as you build out, the larger the property, the more hives. And that is one of the reasons that when we were starting to do research, that was, Dave, one of the things that really was our concern was people's concern about allergic reactions and so on. And I have not yet found anything in any of the, I went to the Cornell agricultural collectives. I went to a bunch of agricultural collectives to look for these sorts of things. And there doesn't seem to be a whole lot that is suggesting that this increases the risk for neighbors. It's basically the people that are going to mostly get stung are the beekeepers, because they're the ones that are manipulating the beehive. And so that's the other reason why I think that the environmental board would be interested in also doing outreach and public education. One of the things that seems to really indicate an importance for introducing beekeeping into a city is intensive education. And that would be something that the board would be happy to do.
I'm wondering if we can build in some kind of education requirement into the permit. So like, for example, I know that one of the risks is when it's time to collect honey or do an inspection of the hive. If you don't do it right, that's when you get a lot of exodus of the bees. And then it could potentially be problematic. And I know honeybees are not aggressive, but occasionally something happens to irritate them, and they will sting. But I'm not sure. David, if we did this and had a permit, is there some way we could require a certain number of hours or a class or something of education on beekeeping?
Sure. You just have you would just have to define what was available. You would have to define what made an educated apiist.
Okay.
So
I mean,
yeah.
Sorry.
No, go ahead, David. Sorry.
No, I was just saying it's like hunter training courses. I mean, boat training courses. There are some that are generated by New York State that give a standard. I don't know that there is a standard, but maybe Kevin knows better.
I haven't seen any standard on that. I looked at the New York State Apiaries Association. That seems to be quasi-governmental. There are a few New York State codes about basically just making sure that there is no, that you're not abusing the bees, it seems like. I haven't seen anything in the code and in any other sample codes that have required such things. Usually it is left as be a good neighbor, be a responsible neighbor, and encouraging of taking part in a beekeeper association. So there's the Leatherstocking Bee Association. I think they have meetings or had meetings. I don't know what they're doing now at the Farmers Museum. And there's another Binghamton, I think, is another nearby one that has that.
Okay. One way I can think about this is imagine a parent or just a person who has a severe bee allergy or a severe allergy. And if stung, would have to be treated with an EpiPen very quickly to prevent their death. And that resident or parent sees that there's a beehive or something is going up near them, and they come to us and protest that this puts their child or themselves in a serious danger, and that this, in fact, is not just we do have an ordinance about problem animals, and the idea of the problem animal is something that depends on the resident saying this particular animal is a problem, and you are now permitting that problem to exist. And I have no defense against it except to limit the freedom of my child to have them stay inside. I'm not bringing that up as a realistic scenario until it is. So how would we handle that? Besides,
allow people to own dogs in the city of Oneonta.
That's what I was going to say. We don't have anything in the city, as far as I can tell, about. I mean, yes, they have to have the rabies shots and things like that. And if the animal
yes,
and if the animal
have to have rabies shots, it's a good point.
But if the animal attacks, then something is done at that point. If you look at the document that Stephen put together that I forwarded to you, one of the statements in there is that any hive that shows unusual aggressiveness has to be removed and requeened, which to me is very similar in spirit. And I'm just a physicist, so the laws that I follow are not that I'm familiar with are not these kinds of laws. But to me, it seems like that is a very similar thing to the dog. If a dog is assumed unaggressive until it is, and then it's dealt with.
The only difference, though, I have to interrupt. The only difference between a dog and bees, though, is dogs we license, and they also have to be on leashes. So I think what we've done over decades' time is really we allow everybody to have a dog, but we limit that world that family has with that dog, so that dog doesn't get aggressive, and it's to limit the accidents that we might have. Where with the bees, I'm not quite sure how you would do that yet, but I mean, maybe what we need to do is talk more with Stephen or even go and look at what other cities have done. Sorry, John.
Oh, no, I appreciate what you're saying. The reason I expressed it that way is we might have someone coming before us with a bona fide, near possibly fatal allergy, which isn't the same as having a crazy dog bite you and open one of your arteries and you bleed to death. It's a matter of there's something that can happen with this bee. And we may have someone come in front of us who is disturbed, bothered by this. And do they have any recourse except to get a rationale from the apologist for bees to say, well, this could happen anywhere. It's just a risk you need to accept. And it's really, you passed on the allergy. So you have to take responsibility for your child and not just.
Bees are naturally occurring. They're already outside.
What's that?
How would you then prove that it was a bee from someone's hive and not just a bee flying around from
I'm just saying,
miles ago?
I'm not asking you to prove that or identify the particular bee, but I'm raising the question just because it's worthy, I think, of discussion by someone who feels terrified by a bee or the possibility of having someone perish because of a bee sting. And we have to answer them. So, and that's all. A lot of places don't serve peanut butter anymore. Luke, I'm just raising it, just anticipating the objection we might receive.
Yeah, so I guess just a question. I'm not aware of any. Are there any statistics that show that areas that allow beekeeping have a higher incidence of bee stings or allergic reactions? Is there any data like that out there?
I'm fine. I'm going to bet there is data, but I'm still talking about
Probably.
a parent who's afraid for the life of their child. And data doesn't cut it.
I really
So
would
that
like,
for them.
John,
And could it happen? It certainly wouldn't cut it. So,
John,
yeah, please.
I'd like to take some time to read through the sample ordinance again,
Good
and
idea.
then look at some of the other cities that allow bees, just to see what their policies and their procedures are. Because I mean, I'd like to be able to do this, but I think I'd like to calm my worries about these typical emotional fears that most people have had just since we were kids, about a bee.
It's like going to the dentist.
Right. So other cities are doing it successfully. I just want to make sure that if we do it, we can be just as successful. And so I want to take our time with this.
That's
Understood. And I'm just going to point out that this is, from what I can tell, is modeled fairly closely, is in line with most other municipalities in New York State.
Okay.
And the one thing that I would kind of point out is that we want to make a distinction between people who are afraid of bees because the bee stings hurt, and are afraid that the little red welt that they get, that everybody gets when you get a little bee sting, is a massive allergic reaction, versus those people who really are massively allergic, and who probably actually already travel around with EpiPens.
That's what I was.
And things like that. So there's
Right.
a distinction, and I think it gets to what Stephen might have been trying to get at, which is that bees are already out there, and there are a lot more aggressive natural pollinators that are out there, like wasps, yellow jackets, that are the ones that are buzzing around our picnics and trying to get into our sodas. Honeybees want nothing to do with that. They just want to go to a flower. And so anybody that is already living in this world who is that allergic would probably be already prepared for that. And because we cannot distinguish between a honeybee that is from this hive or that hive or that wild hive over there.
I will say, though, the psychological impact of being allergic and having an EpiPen with you at all times, which I mean, I know what that's like. We have to do that in our family, not because of bees, but for other reasons. But then to wake up one day and you find out your neighbor is putting in beehives next door, psychologically, that's something that I'm sure they can't ignore. So, but I'm not ready to make a decision on this tonight, John. I want to take some time with it and do a little bit more reading to see what's out there and what everybody else does, is because for me, it's more about the enforcement and how that's done.
Let's see. Mark is here. Any thoughts, Mark, before we move on?
Yeah, well, I'm certainly supportive of the ordinance. I understand Dave's point, and I think further research, if that's desired, would be helpful. To return, Dave, to a point that you made earlier with regards to what happens if a hive needs to be collected for some type of reason, and not wanting to put that onto Stephen's office. I was thinking that there might be an opportunity to involve the Leatherstocking Beekeeping Association, that maybe they can come out and take troubled hives, or there might be some easy ways around that that wouldn't burden city employees any further. But certainly I'm supportive of this. I understand some of the concerns, but I think that the literature shows that this is, there's really not very many issues associated with beekeeping in the places that have adopted this.
One thing I'd suggest, David Burzig sent us a piece on beekeeping, and we also have the piece that was worked out by Steve and perhaps Kevin. If someone could look at those two things and then work with David to actually draft what the ordinance would be. I don't know if they are exact or they have those things. I don't know who is best equipped to deal with that and put these two examples together, or tell us which one to go with.
If I could jump in,
Please.
the one that had been prepared by the environmental board was an amendment to our current animal ordinance. So the plan was to integrate language into our current ordinance. The one that I sent out was a model ordinance that was provided by the New York State Beekeepers Association, which is their model statute, which they provide to municipalities who are looking to have a standalone beekeeping. So they may in fact be essentially the same things. I didn't do a matchup, but just the one that I sent out happens to be a comprehensive one, and the one that was put together by the environmental committee was an integrated, was an integrated statute. So they're both aiming for the same things, and they both address the same issues and set up the provisions for flyways and limited height and limited setbacks. And that becomes a philosophic question, how we're going to address things like, again, the psychological concerns of neighbors is not something that's going to be set forth in either of these. It's going to be something that's going to have to be discussed and decided upon, and figure out a way to integrate it into the statute in a way that would provide some sort of, objective mechanism for doing that.
My only thought on it is, if something that that in the master or the example from the Beekeeping Association has some elements that are relevant to this that could be added, that would be great. But I still have two things. I'm not sure I want to sit down and try to figure out the world of bees. Do you want, who would like to do that?
So before we go any further, the ordinance that I put together and that was submitted to the environmental board is based on the city of Buffalo's urban beekeeping ordinance. And it also incorporates parts of Pennsylvania's state bee law. Because Pennsylvania is one of the few states that has a statewide beekeeping ordinance. So that's what this code is drafted off of. A fairly large municipality that allows beekeeping, as well as a state ordinance that Pennsylvania made to oversee their entire, if you operate bees in the state of Pennsylvania, you're subject to that law.
So Stephen, what are you saying? That the one that you wrote is the way to go?
What I'm saying is, if we come up with something that the state of Pennsylvania and the city of Buffalo didn't, I would be very surprised.
A thought, which maybe this is going a step too far, but would there be any consideration to requiring the consent of contiguous property owners?
That creates some equal protection arguments. Like, if you pay me $500, I will then agree. Otherwise, screw you. There could be, non-need foundation. It's something we could look at. I mean, obviously, that you could, if you had the consent of all adjoining neighbors, that would obviously could be a mechanism that would make it okay. But then if somebody moved in next door later, I suppose if they bought the house, they knew it was next door. I don't know. It's something we could talk about. But just saying you can't have it unless you have neighbors agree in writing. I think something that black and white would be problematic.
I think the way around that is with a setback, or the distance between where you put it to the property line.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, that's the whole idea is to make sure that it's not so dense. And that is why we encourage Stephen to put in the sliding scale, so that bigger properties that could handle that could do that. Again, looking at the ordinances, and I was not aware, though I did know about Pennsylvania having it, and I recognized a lot of what was in this code as being that Stephen had given us that was similar to Pennsylvania's. I have not seen a whole lot where anybody has required the permission of the neighbors. Again, I think what you all choose to do obviously is what your committee is for and for the common council. But I do want to just point out that I think it's significant that this has been adopted by a entire state that's contiguous and nearby to this part of New York.
We could require possibly a special use permit for it, which would allow neighboring properties to comment before the permit was issued.
You also might be able to have statutory minimums and then waiver of the minimums, have a closer setback or something like that with the consent of neighbors, have more liberal requirements if you have consent of the neighbors, something like that. That could be something you could kick around.
I like the idea of beekeeping. I think it'll be fine. My question was not to put Stephen on the spot about which one is better. I just want to see if there's anything in this ordinance that could be additive to the one that has been prepared. That's all I'm bringing up. The other thing is thinking of the reason I think this way is essentially I'm a pessimist, and that I thought about the complaint that might come somewhere along the line about what has happened from a person who is, for example, afraid of bees. That's where I'm also working on the way people respond to students. There are people who hate students. They hate all the noise. They think they should be in a monk's cowl, and they have irrational fears, or they are bothered by noise or something. And they'll come to council or zoning and say, oh, I got this problem. The students should be, and it's their way. Zoning handles it well. Students are citizens, and they have a right to walk down the street, etc. And that's that. So we can't eliminate the disturbances that can sometimes caused by a number of things, noise, whatever. But I like the ordinance. I just want to make sure that it is a response, overall a responsible ordinance. And I just have two things in front of me. And I don't know if one of them has valid points that could be added to the one that has been developed so far. If it is, I don't have any reason to not proceed once we have a final ordinance drafted that can be laid on council and discussed. Yeah, Dave.
I actually am liking more the idea of needing an SUP for it, because that would eliminate the issue with a neighbor. That way it gives the neighbors, as we said before, it gives the neighbors a chance to voice their opinion about it, and if they have any objection. And a lot of the permits are, from what I've seen, are annual permits. So bringing that back every year would eliminate the issue if you've got a big changeover over the years of neighbors moving in or not. So it's my thought.
Mark, you're muted. Oh,
Yep. Just for clarification, can we review really quickly what that process would be in order to get that permit through that process?
Well, Mark, that is something that is currently, I believe, handled through the Planning Commission.
Yep.
So if somebody wanted to apply for special use permit, they apply to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission will issue it based upon whatever criteria is established. And people are notified in the neighborhood of the application, so they have an opportunity to attend the meeting and voice any concerns in front of the commission before they make the decision to issue it.
Spoken like a true former chairman of the planning board.
Thank you.
go that smoothly, though.
So where did we go from here? And who's going to do what?
What do you mean, John?
What happens next?
I don't know.
By
I mean, you
whom?
guys could override me, but I'd like another, I'd like to wait till the next meeting and we can have
Sure.
Katie here too, and that'll give me time to look through a little bit more and if I have any other questions that I feel I need to have answered, I can do that.
Well, that's fine. A little more time is
Yeah.
requested. Mark has assured me that unless we have some invasive version of bees coming in, they're hibernating now. So we don't have to make a decision very quickly to accommodate any of their flying by. So I'm fine with taking the time to put together an ordinance trying to address as many concerns as we can. I don't know, that's all. A little more time to think about it and put things together, and we can do that, and planning can do that. So who's doing it?
I think it should be done through the legislative committee.
Okay. How qualified are you? I'm not.
What are you asking to do? Do you
Get
want
a,
changes made, or what? I mean, what?
I don't know if I'm asking for anything. If you should say, Stephen, that you think that the one that's been developed is the one we should go with, we can just have it drafted that way, and then it can be discussed by the council after us. Mark, I think you were waving.
Yeah, if I could just throw some ideas in here, I'd like to say that Stephen certainly did a lot of research into this, as did the environmental board. I think in having had the opportunity to look at a lot of the different drafts, as well as looking at some of the different legislation coming out of different areas, I think it is pretty comprehensive and addresses a lot of different areas, a lot of different aspects of this. But if you all would like to review others and make any recommendations, that's certainly well within your right. But I think at this point, this is possible ordinance is possibly ready to move ahead. It's just a matter of whether you want to add anything into it. So I would leave that to you all to look at and discuss. But I think that the environmental board and Stephen Yearley have certainly done quite a bit in terms of preparing a really well thought out document.
Dave? And then
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I agree with Mark. I was looking at the sample ordinance that was given out as the base. And what I want to do is just do a little bit more reading to see what other communities are doing and see if there's anything else that needs to be added, or I feel that might be added.
I was going to say, I think in light of hearing of the evidence that was used in the process that was used, I'm happy to move this forward to council. Understanding if Dave wants more time, that's fine. But those are my thoughts on it. I think it looks pretty good.
Let me just remind you that this wouldn't automatically go to the next council meeting. This would result in it being laid on the desks of council members. It probably wouldn't go until the following council meeting. Then any changes to it would require starting all over again. You can't just at the council meeting after discussion,
Right.
make a small change to it. So if the interest is to get this passed by the entire council, it's probably wise to take the time to make sure that everything has been looked into, at least the people in this group's greatest comfort, because if not, you stand the risk of having the same type of concerns raised when it's addressed by the whole council, not being passed. You can't make amendments at that time. You've got to start all over again.
Yeah, I was hoping that we could bring this back to the next legislative committee meeting and hopefully hammer out something that we can all agree to at that point.
I agree with that. I think also I'm recognizing that these are the draft amendments for the current code. And for me, I can look at the beekeeping sample and see if there's anything in there that's not reflected there, if it seems relevant. But otherwise, the draft amendment is not going to be, we're talking about adding something to chapter 68, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So the thing that says draft amendments to chapter 68, we could be ready to go with that content. But I don't need to speed it up. I think that it's in the right format. I would probably only be looking to see if there was anything else in there in the sample that was sent out. But aside from that, I'm not prepared to go any further because I don't have them clear in my mind.
Keep
So
in
I
mind,
agree
it
with
took-
Dave.
Remember, it took, I think, almost a year to approve chickens.
A lot of people still don't approve them.
I knew you were going to bring that up, Gary.
That's why I did my homework.
I just
That's
want to
six
get back to
chickens right
whether the NOAA, the National Oceanic and whatever administration flag should be flying down in our plaza. Anyway, I'm good with this. Luke, I think that's right. Luke?
Yes, I think one of those three people watching are Katie. I just had a notification pop up and she has a question. If I may, is it proper to read the question?
Sure.
She asks, can we bring it to the agenda rather than a motion as part of the prepared council discussion, just to get the concerns of other council members?
Anybody can bring it up during the council discussion part of the agenda.
So I think yes, Katie, if you're watching.
Well, I think Gary, correct me if I'm wrong, Gary, but I think Gary means that it's not going to be put on the agenda, but anybody can bring it up as a discussion at the end.
That's
What
what I
was
was
the-
saying. That's what I was saying, correct.
Okay.
Okay, so the idea is to discuss the draft at a council meeting? Am I muted?
No, I'm just just thinking, John. No, I think
Did you mute your thinking?
no, I'm trying to go as fast as I can. It's just the gears don't always turn quite quickly as you want them to. I think it was if I'm wrong, correct me. I think what Katie was saying was maybe as an additional business kind of thing. But I think what Dave was saying and what the mayor was saying, it makes a lot of sense. We don't want to risk bringing this forward and having it shot down. I'm in favor of this. I think this is great, but especially in light of hearing the possibility of having to start over.
Oh, no. It's not what I was proposing. I think the draft amendment section is fine until somebody suggests a change to it. But we can, would that be that at a council meeting or be just with us, Dave? What's your preference?
I'm not completely sold on sending out a draft amendment that's
Okay.
hasn't been passed through this committee yet. It's almost like putting the cart before the horse. But I think it's definitely appropriate to talk with the other council members to tell them what the idea is and get their opinions and see what their thoughts are.
Well, I think you should express to them what has been discussed here, both the reasons for it and what concerns have been raised.
I can bring that up and send at the reporting at the council meeting.
Right. As well as possible solutions that we've discussed too for some of the concerns.
Will be an open discussion at the council then. Yeah. All right. I feel,
John, you can lead that discussion as part of your committee report.
sure, that's what I was thinking. And I'll have a copy of this draft as well, because they can, I don't see anything wrong with having that content in front of people. Not to be voted on, just to enlighten us.
John, I've got a 6 o'clock meeting I got to go to. Is there
Me
anything else
too.
you need me for
Nothing.
between
for
now
you.
and 6?
No.
Okay,
And
I'll sign
have
off.
I also have a 6 o'clock meeting, so can we,
Take care, guys. Thanks.
Thank you.
Me too.
Any
Thank you,
other,
everybody.
Thank you. Mayor.
any other items for discussion? And
Not for me.
okay, oh, and I can talk to you and Mark privately about how to enlighten the council or give them enough information to think about it. Yes, Mark?
Not to prolong the meeting, but I do really want to thank the environmental board for all their work since March working on this. I think this is an example of kind of the good work where a citizen brought this forward as a concern to the environmental board. They did their due diligence, they did their research, and they brought this forward. There was a lot of time behind that. So I just want to point that out.
And thanks to Stephen as well.
Yeah, and all right. Thank you very much, Stephen.
Made
Thank
our
you,
job a
Kevin.
lot- Made our job a lot.
And
easier.
Mark.
I just want to put out that at any point, if you need a member from the environmental board, or would like a member of the environmental board to come to the next one of these, or to a common council meeting, if you thought that would be appropriate, just just reach out to me, and we'll be happy to be an advocate.
It might be
after-
helpful when this goes to the, well, actually, John, it may be helpful if we have somebody from the environmental board or even Mark at our next meeting. And then definitely at the council meeting, if whatever we decide on moves forward to a motion. That way we have somebody that can answer the questions. I mean, Mark obviously will be at the council meeting, but it would be nice if we could have another voice
Yes,
so they can back each other up too.
Yeah, I'd be happy to do that if I can. I'm sure we can find a member for that particular day. I'm sure we can find a member of the board who would be able to do this, or at your service. We are the advisory board, so we might as well, advise it once in a while.
That's right.
Well, okay, everybody, thank you so much for inviting me. I appreciate the time and the concerns you put forward.
yeah, I think overall the support is there for this. We'll just have to get it to a final form for consideration and made the part of the ordinance. So I think we're fine with this.
I think so.
Hey,
Excellent.
John, if we're done, I got to run too. So
Okay, but think about the mink ordinance, because I'm going to start raising minks. in
good
my
night,
backyard.
John. Good night, John.
Okay, it's gonna be one of those things, huh? All right.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much. Have a good night, everyone.